Hello and welcome to Rights and Recourse, a program that tackles issues affecting your rights and matters of legal recourse. My name is Dumila Matez. Remember, you can also take part in our discussion today by tweeting us at Rights Recourse or calling our studio line on 011 714 5497 or 5498. You can also SMS your views by sending the word recourse to 34025 34025. Alternatively, email your thoughts to rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. The past week's social media space sparked an online war, raising legal and human rights questions about how we use social media. We spoke to legal and social media experts. Let us take a look at this insert.
I'm here at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development to speak to the Honorable Minister Michael Masuta about violations, dangers and your rights when it comes to social media. Come with me. Minister, can you please tell us, do we have social media policies in South Africa, and what are those policies?
All law and all legality derives its authority from the Constitution first and foremost. And in that Constitution, there's a Bill of Rights that guarantee, amongst other things, certain rights with certain limits. And free speech is one of those rights. But that free speech is, in the very same Constitution, limited to the extent that it does not unfairly violate other people's rights.
In terms of the social media violations, what is prosecutable and what is not prosecutable?
You then have to look at the facts and apply them to the law to say, does this incident constitute a violation of any particular law? Now, examples would be that at common law we have what we call crimen injuria, which is verbal assault of an individual. In other words, you're not using a knife or your hand to assault somebody, but you're using your words to assault somebody. Now that person can lay a criminal charge against that assault, and you could be prosecuted criminally. There's also the law of defamation. If you damage a person's good name without good reason, and you do so unlawfully in that what you're saying about that person is actually not even correct factually, that person can sue you for spoiling their good name unjustifiably and recover damages from you for your actions.
What are the benefits that are linked with social media or being on social media, and what are the limits in terms of what you can say and not say on social media?
The benefits of social networks obviously would be that you get news in an instant, so you get to communicate not just with people in South Africa, like people in the rest of the continent of Africa.
Do you know your rights when it comes to social media?
I know that I can't be irresponsible on social media because it's a public platform, and those things can come back to me in my career, in my family as well.
What type of post would offend you on social media?
People who put other people down for no reason, who make fun of other people's misfortunes like unemployment, that offends me. And people who talk reckless about racism, those kind of things, they do get to me a bit.
I'm here at the Joburg CBD to speak to one of the social media gurus, Themba Hadebe, about the dangers of social media. What are the limitations when it comes to what you can say about your employer or your organization? Can one post get me into trouble or get me fired at work?
The best thing is that never mention your work in social media. You can't write things such as, I hate my job, I quit. Because that some companies will accept that as a resignation, that you have actually quit on social media, and they will win the case in the courts of justice.
I really would urge all parties in society, whether in relation to politics or in social intercourse, to really act with restraint and be considerate towards each other whilst exercising this right. In other words, exercise your rights under the Constitution responsibly with due regard to the rights of others and the sensitivities of others.
Well, joining us on today's topic are Mr. Raymond Louw, Chairman of the South African chapter of the Media Institute of Southern Africa, Siyabonga Africa, a social media expert from SABC Digital. Gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
A rather difficult topic to many and a strange topic, and Siyabonga has told me already that he's no guru in this subject. Generally, social media has become a blessing in disguise in terms of communication, and it could also be one's worst enemy.
Definitely. I mean, I believe that social media is one of those developments in technology which allowed us to actually, reach across distances in order to touch each other, in terms of, visually, textually, and in some ways, almost abstractly, I believe that social media is more of an affordance than it is, a disadvantage. And so we should actually, see it for what it is, which is a new form of communication as opposed to like some tool that we can do whatever we want to do with.
Apparently it could also be addictive.
Definitely. I mean, a lot of social media companies these days, their main business model is essentially to keep you basically online every single day at every single hour. I mean, Facebook has become, it used to be a communication stream. Now it is more of a data company than anything else. I mean, like they're selling your relationship information, what movies you like, what series you like, what books you read. They're selling this to other media companies, who take this and say, oh, okay, if this person likes this and that movie, maybe you should make, more of this and that movie instead. It's become, a data stream. It's almost like Google, these days, and Google mines what you actually look, in terms of what you search for. So, that's essentially what their business model is. It's addiction over actual consumption.
Well, I've actually used Twitter a lot for research because you found a lot of things on Twitter. Mr. Raymond Louw, the Human Rights Commission received apparently over 200 racism complaints during a 7-month period, most due to social media. What could these be around racism? What things could be around racism that makes the Human Rights Commission to sit up and take note?
Well, racist comments, which are derogatory of other races, or of their religions, or of their cultures. I would think that's the kind of comments they get. I haven't studied what the Human Rights Commission has had, and of course they've got the recourse to deal with it. They've got the sources, the powers to deal with it, should I put it that way.
By the way, we did expect the Human Rights Commission to be here. Unfortunately, they could not be here. But I'm not putting you in the seat of the minister. But what I want to know, he made reference to this question I'm about to ask. Do we in South Africa have legislation that regulates social media?
Well, you have some regulation, but not a total regulatory approach to the social media. And some regulation I'm referring to is that related to the Press Council, which regulates the print media through an ombudsman system. And part of its duties are to deal with complaints about the social media publication by the media. If the media runs a website which deals with either their news content or the comments about their news content, and a person has a complaint about that because it damages their reputation or is they regard it as defamatory, then they can take that to the Press Council's ombudsman to deal with. But it is only that very small segment of social media, which is the web page of print media.
Yeah, definitely. It's a small segment. It's not the entire social sphere.
No. Well, I mean, having regulation of the entire social media sphere is a thought that has crossed people's minds, and they have discussed it, but they have shied away from it because that would be an intrusion on freedom of speech, and a really serious intrusion on freedom of speech. You know, I regard the Facebook pages and the social media generally as a form of the kind of discourse that used to take place at a place called Hyde Park Corner in London, where people stood on soapboxes and propounded their views. Now, they had, of course, a very limited audience. They just had the people in front of them, 200 or 300, maybe even 400. But now you've got somebody being able to say all that through the social media, and the audience is vast.
Yeah, if we look at social media essentially as like one big, affordance, which is that many-to-many communication is now actually feasibly possible, as opposed to one-to-many, which is, the old broadcast model where it's like, one newspaper used to tell you what the news was, one TV broadcast used to tell you what the news was. Now it's like, I can get my news and my views from different people. And, that's essentially what social media is. It's like, this huge sphere of communication where people can actually talk to each other, unmitigated, unrestrained from the normal social conventions that we actually deal with day to day.
Talk to each other
quickly, Mbali and Raymond.
The difference. Talk to each other in public,
yeah,
not in a private telephone.
Yes.
Not a private telephone.
Oh yeah, we're going to go to telecommunications, but yeah.
Well, people normally speak about whenever there's a very important meeting,
yes,
where sparks could fly. People normally say, I wish I was a fly on the wall. Today they don't even have to say that because the stuff that was discussed in that meeting might come out in social media.
That is correct.
Indeed. I mean, like, these days you're having, stockbroking and, information about companies coming up within minutes, milliseconds of, these announcements being made within the boardroom. It's like, what we're seeing today is essentially this new way of communication, which is more than just delayed information. It's actually instantaneous. It's like, we are seeing and talking to each other in fractions of a second, as opposed to, the delayed response that we used to have.
Over the last week, we have seen an avalanche of statements made by high-profile personalities on social media. And is it really necessary that we should educate people about what we call the freedom of speech?
Well, I thought people were to some degree educated by the fact that we have a constitution which outlines the parameters of freedom of speech, which is its freedom of expression and freedom of the press, and of course broadcasting, and also freedom of academic study. There are limitations. The one is incitement to violence, another one is propaganda for war, and of course racism, expressing racist thoughts. Now, but people have been, well, they should have studied the Constitution, but if they haven't, they've been told enough about it, I should imagine, that people do understand that freedom of speech, and freedom of speech is absolutely essential if we are going to maintain the democracy that we have instituted in this country. You can't have a democracy operating with any degree of efficiency or any degree of ability to meet the demands of the people unless there is freedom of speech of a high quality and a high level of comprehensiveness in the sense of its coverage.
There's something, there's a dichotomy here, Siyabonga, in the sense that if a Human Rights Commission takes seriously
yes,
anything around racism on Twitter, don't get me wrong, not that racism should not be taken seriously. What about the freedom of speech? There's a dichotomy here.
I believe that people, we have this affordance now to essentially broadcast our lives however we see it fit, and I believe that what we've entered into is more of a social contract than it is, in terms of a legal contract. You are now essentially emboldened to do whatever you want to do online, but you have to also do it within the common sense and restraints of what is good within the normal day-to-day life. So, if you are a fan of X and S and X, which might possibly, infringe on somebody else's views and points of views, then you have to actually, exercise a little bit of restraint, actually.
Not necessarily.
We'll continue this discussion as we go along. Can we have a no-holds-barred freedom of speech? If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, please call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Rights Recourse, or email us at rightsandrecourse@sabc.co.za. We'll be back after the break.
Eskom could miss a deadline for a crucial step towards turning on the Medupi power station. But the power utility says it will probably meet the December the 24th deadline.
We're looking good. We've come through 3 days, obviously, of load shedding, which has unfortunately been necessary, but it's been useful to have built up our reserves for the coming week.
Shares of private hospital group Netcare jumped up today and closed on a high after the company reported increased annual profits.
The hospital group is also taking steps to aggressively reduce its dependence on Eskom due to increasing power outages and rising costs.
We'll be reducing our energy needs by some 35% over the next 10 years, and our cumulative savings of our forecast electricity bill will be in the region of R1 billion. So we're doing something very constructive about the challenges we're facing at the moment.
That's Business News, weekdays at 6 p.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. We still invite your calls and take part and be part of this discussion. We took our cameras to the streets of Johannesburg to gather public opinion on social media.
Are you on social media, whether Twitter, Facebook, Instagram?
I am on WhatsApp, actually. I'm not on Twitter, on Facebook. The reason being on that I excuse myself on WhatsApp and Facebook. I see them as something that is corrupting, understand? People, they are misusing and abusing those social medias. But as for WhatsApp, especially, someone doesn't have your numbers, doesn't have to link on those social media, and doesn't come to think that interrupting your life.
Do you know your rights when it comes to social media?
No, I don't really.
Not really. No.
Well, I suppose I do personally. I mean, yeah, I can't allow someone stealing my pictures. Let's say, for instance, on Facebook, I post something, whatever. You know, I wouldn't feel actually comfortable when someone is actually, you know, taking my pictures. Yeah, I think it goes around somewhere there.
No, I don't know my rights.
Yes, I'm very informed about that, and I have been hearing things about violations of rights on social media and things like that, so I am up to date on those sort of things.
Well, we've heard a variety of views there from the people we spoke to. We'll quickly go to, I saw you nodding your head when they talk about WhatsApp. WhatsApp is actually, I seem to remember, help me if I'm wrong, it's actually a discussion between two people. It's a closed discussion between two people, but somebody can get in there and find out what you're talking about.
It is, you know, it's closed to a degree, and it's also open to a certain degree as well. I mean, ever since Facebook bought WhatsApp, you know, like, I feel as though they've opened up that data to a whole new type of interaction. But it's also a case of, you know, one-to-one communication as opposed to many, which you can't actually engage in when you create groups and such. You see, people tend to like actually see social media as in anything that's technological. And I think that, you know, you need to actually really exercise some sort of discretion in that, because one, WhatsApp started off as a communication stream. It's, you know, cheap chat. And now it's evolved into actual social media, where it's like, you know, you can actually create groups and actually spread out the message to more than just one person. So we need to actually, you know, really think how we define social media in terms of that field. Like, is it one-to-many, is it many-to-many type of communication?
The tweet by Zelda Hlangani last week that actually brought out this whole storm. Not that there was no storm before. There was a Steve Hofmeyr storm. There's also Zelda Hlangani storm. But many of the people who were criticizing Zelda, the comments were bordering close to curtailing her freedom of speech.
Yes, I mean, here's the thing, at the same time, is that, you know, who are you in terms of social media? We exhibit certain personas online. A person can be anonymous, a person can be public, and what Zelda Kranj is a very public person associated to an incredibly larger person who's, you know, huge in terms of the, you know, the online world, Nelson Mandela. And she made the mistake of actually saying something which could also be attributed to her relationship with Nelson Mandela. And that was her biggest mistake, was like, you know, saying something whilst at the same time being cognizant of her relationship with the said person. So I believe that if she was someone who was just ordinary on the streets, you know, who, you know, no sort of association with Nelson Mandela, her comment would have been passed off as just some other person just saying what she wants to say. But because she is this persona of Zelda Kranj, who wrote a book about her time with Nelson Mandela, it turned into something else. And that's what we need to be cognizant of, is who are you on social media?
That discussion, Raymond, is still bubbling around, but should her freedom of speech be curtailed, as I was, the kind of things I was reading with reference to what she said?
No, I don't think it should be curtailed, but she has apologized for what she said, although my feeling was that what she said was a legitimate comment on what the president of the country is saying, which she interpreted as an attack on whites. The unfortunate, as Sebanyoni has indicated, is the association she had with Nelson Mandela, which gave it a new twist, a new interpretation among the people who read that statement. And but it was, the attempt to stop her was in fact trying to curtail her freedom of speech, because she said nothing really that one could describe as being undesirable. It was a fair comment, or maybe slightly unfair comment, in the sense of attributing a whole range of statements to the president, where he only said one statement.
Sebonga, you're burning to say something.
No, I mean, I was totally agreeing with Raymond. I mean, what she said, of course, you know, is attributed to fair speech. And it's just the question of, you know, who, like I said, who are you on social media? And the question is, and the reality is that she's someone who is, you know, associated with Nelson Mandela, and that's what actually really brought her down, is the fact that she has this person who's, you know, essentially the persona of non-racialism and etc., and here she is saying something which is loaded with, you know, racial sentimentality. So it really took her comment into a new stratosphere of actual, you know, said speech.
Shouldn't we accept that a person is a person, she's got feelings, she understands what she understands, she's old enough to understand, and she has to come out of this Nelson Mandela shadow?
Well, it's kind of profited her. I mean, like, her book sold for 50 million rands, you know, in the previous year. So, I mean, as someone who's kind of signed that contract, whereas, you know, my fame and fortune is actually really tied to Nelson Mandela, she actually should be cognizant of the fact that whatever she says will be tied to that relationship that she had with said person.
I was quickly, Raymond, I was actually surprised by the language that was used in response to what she said. The language was vulgar. Why is this language that was vulgar referring to her not treated in the same way?
Well, it should have been. It was, I think that the criticisms were overstated.
Yes.
And to a certain extent taken out of context.
Yeah.
And the context is only her relationship with a non-racial person like Mandela, and she was making a racial commentary.
But she's not Mandela.
She's not Mandela, but she's speaking in terms of her relationship with Mandela. That's what leads, that's what gives her credence in the whole social sphere. What people need to realize is that your credibility online is tied to the relationships that you have with other people. So she could be, you know, Joe Soap, but because she's Joe Soap plus Nelson Mandela in terms of like the person that she dealt with, she's someone else. She's extraordinary. She's not ordinary. And that's what makes her comments so much more, you know, essentially liable to comment, like, you know, especially in terms of like the racial stuff that she got back.
Even though the tweet was not referring to any individual, but goodness me, I think have we gotten over this intolerance thing in South Africa?
I think we're trying to, but we're struggling.
Very much so. I think we're having like two different conversations here. I think, on one hand, we're talking about, how people relate to each other on the street, whereas, social media is a whole nother ecosystem, which is dictated in terms of like what you do online, how much credibility you have, what, essentially, it's tied to what your digital life is all about. And a person can craft a whole persona on digital life and live another one in real life. And you need to actually be cognizant of that there's two different people that are existing or coexisting in terms of, social media.
I know you're not representing the Human Rights Commission. We earlier said the Human Rights Commission received over 200 racism complaints. But is it the Human Rights Commission that should be dealing with these issues?
Well, it is. It's a human right. A racism complaint it relates to a human right, and so therefore it's appropriate for them to deal with it. But we don't know how they deal with it.
I mean, like, look at the comment that our President Jacob Zuma said in terms of his daughter getting married and woman, and it was taken out of that one broadcast stream and thrown into social media, and it became such a thing that a person actually laid a complaint to the Human Rights Commission, and it was endorsed and said that he was talking out of turn and out of context. So it's really interesting, nothing dies on the internet. Seriously, you can put up a picture, delete it, and it'll still be there. It's data.
The normal media has the ombudsman and also the watchdog, the media watchdog, but in this case, the reason why I'm asking this question, whether this should this be in the realm of the Human Rights Commission, is normally I would expect the press ombudsman to deal with these issues or the media watchdog.
No. The press ombudsman deals with the print media. It's specifically related to the print media. The Broadcast Complaints Commission deals with the broadcast media. So there are two regulatory processes or institutions which are dealing with the media, the conventional media. Now, to extend their work into a public media operation like Facebook would be regarded as an intrusion on people's rights to express themselves. And I think it's a very good idea that they don't. Those two institutions keep well clear. Except in the case of the print media, they have to, of course, adjudicate on print media websites, because that relates to the conduct of the print media in terms of the press code. And I should imagine the same thing would happen with the Broadcast Complaints Commission.
I mean, what you're seeing today is a lot of self-regulation. So a lot of broadcasters these days have their own social media policies in terms of what their journalists and producers, etc., can say and cannot say online. The BBC has one, SABC, we do have one. It's common practice in order to have one.
Can you take us into what the SABC is? How does the SABC deal with their own journalists who might say they are allowed to put some stuff, breaking news onto online platforms, but they cannot? There are certain things they cannot say.
Of course, you can't really endorse certain comments and statements. It's very far-reaching, and to go into it would be like a talk into ad nauseum. But at the end of the day, essentially is, first do no harm, especially to the brand and to the fact that we are journalists ourselves.
If I were to talk about endorsing statements on social media, if I were to retweet a statement made by somebody else, am I just as liable as that person who put the tweet on, first of all?
Depending on what the statement's about. But I think you are liable. If you retweet it, you are in fact publishing it. And that would constitute, in terms of the defamation law, publication, and therefore responsibility.
I agree with Raymond there. It's one of those questions which really come up so many times. As a state broadcaster, we just say, we add those disclaimers to our tweets that we are not endorsing, but at the same time we know that you cannot retweet said person's statement which might, contradict what is against the law.
Taking into account, I've been watching the Sunette Bridges case in Cape Town that the Human Rights Commission took to the High Court in Cape Town. I got a sense that the judge in that case was similarly saying, guys, go and sort this thing outside. We are not the place where this thing should be taking place.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at social media as a whole, it's at this stage where it's like the Wild West, you know, where you're still trying to figure out what's going on, where are we going, and what are we doing. So, you know, I totally understand why the judge would say that, because, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, rather let the individuals deal with each other and their own prides and prejudices in that situation, as opposed to like trying to enact a certain law into which might not actually really be applicable.
Well, what they were trying to do was to make her responsible for statements, as I understand it, statements that had been placed on her Facebook page without her knowledge. And she was regarded as responsible for that because she had a Facebook page under her name. And she was supposed to police it. Well, I think, frankly, it's practically impossible to do that. For instance, somebody puts something on your Facebook page this minute, somebody else reads that in the second minute and takes umbrage and lays a complaint. You have had no time whatsoever to do anything about it. So I think the judge was quite right in saying that he didn't want to deal with the case.
What you're saying is actually the same thing that was said by Dr. Nzimande at the commemoration of the death of Joe Slovo, where he said media houses will need to try and check what kind of stuff is put on their website. Some of it is pretty racist.
Yeah, I mean that's why you have to have social media policies, you know, in order to actually dictate what do you do in said situation. It's all about, you know, whatever promise and tools and bargain that you have. If you say to people that I will interact with you in this way and I expect you to interact with me in this way, that's the rules and regulations that you put in place.
But there's no difference between...
We'll come back to that, Raymond, but if you'd like to join us on today's discussion, please call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Or tweet us at Rights and Recourse, or email us your views, what we should be talking about in future on Rights and Recourse at sabc.co.za. Don't go away, stay with us.
Should marijuana be legalized in South Africa or not?
The legalization of dagga is a no to our country. Look at the rate of rape in our country because of people that
But you can't say dagga makes people
that
get
are under
raped
the
then.
influence of dagga.
When a young man comes to you and says, I'm having a problem with dagga, do you send him to jail?
We don't send them
Then
to
you already concede that you agree that prohibition is not the answer, Mr.
because
Panga.
our aim is to help them.
As is ours.
It is you helping them by giving them dagga. How are you going to control this? Just give me a chance. Because if you cannot control it now, as the CYP of South Africa, we say no to the legalization of dagga. No matter what you study, no matter what you tell me, I say no.
Watch Newsroom with me, Eben Janssen, weekdays at 9 a.m. on the SABC News channel.
Welcome back. Yes, we are discussing social media and the freedom of speech or freedom of expression. I know, Raymond, you were saying something before we went to the break, but first of all, let's have a look and see what the Twitter community is saying. Well, the very Twitter community here, Kenneth Makunyane says, definitely we need a no-holds-barred freedom on social media. Daniel Ngambule says, yes, Siyabonga is right. Social media becomes addictive and you see the whole day doing nothing other than chatting. And freedom of speech by Eden, freedom of speech versus defamation, freedom fighting versus terrorism. I can understand this. Well, we'll make him understand because Raymond will be able to discuss that. Raymond, you were saying something before we went to the break.
Yes, there was a suggestion that there should be media regulation of their websites. And of course there would be media regulation of their website because it's adjudicated by the press ombudsman in terms of the press code, so it would have to conform to the press code. But that's the only extent to which the media could in fact, shall we say, edit the website, which in the same way would be editing its readers' columns in the newspaper, or in fact editing the reports of their journalists.
But Raymond, you know, I know, Siyabonga knows, once I put something on a website, I publish it. It's on, it's gone.
Oh, well, if you're putting something on a newspaper's website, the newspaper has the opportunity of deciding how to edit that, whether to in fact allow it, because it may be obscene, and that would be illegal. So they would be able to take it off. A Facebook website may be somewhat different. Once it goes on, once you've put something on the Facebook, that's there for all to see. And it's not regulated.
Siyabonga, I know you wanted to say something on this very issue, but I wanted to combine your response with this one. Nkambule says, yes, Siyabonga is right, social media becomes addictive. They you see the whole day chatting. Now I want you to talk to us about what is company policy regarding to sitting and going through Facebook the whole day and not do your work. You're sitting on Facebook.
I mean, it depends on the company you're working with in terms of like what they deem as productive work and not productive work. So you could be working for a media company which actually relies on, you know, Facebook posts. So your company time actually is sitting on Facebook and seeing what people are saying and mining essentially the data that comes out of that. But, you know, going to what Raymond was talking about, it's all about control. And talking about a website versus a social media platform, I think those are two different things. A website can be subject to a certain amount of control, in fact a lot more control, as opposed to social media, where social media is all about the people have the control. They can say what they want to say, as opposed to a website.
Two things are different, that's quite true.
Yeah.
The other thing I wanted to ask you is, if I put something on Twitter, you have a recourse that you can always respond to what I'm saying and put your view across. Nobody stops you from doing that. We seem to have lost sight of an old adage by Voltaire. I would differ with what you are saying, but I will defend to the hilt your right to say it.
Of course, I mean, like there is that adage. I mean, I'll counter Voltaire with Jean-Jacques Rousseau in terms of the social contract that we actually, you know, engage in whenever we go into social media. In fact, whenever we engage in anything that is within society, it's all about not harming the next person and saying and doing. I mean, words can have impact. Words can harm people, and knowing that whatever you say could potentially harm someone is what you need to bear in mind whenever you make comment online, especially in social media.
Well, I would say that I go along with that. The whole intention of social media is to express your views, but certainly not defame other people. That's what you're really thinking of when you're talking about harm.
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfectly valid piece of advice that you've just given to people.
Have we had a case in court where something that was on social media, the person who placed it had been the court had ruled against that person?
I can't recall.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's still within so many realms of. I know in the US we've had cases where a person's comment has been used as evidence against a person. But
can you use evidence from social media against a person?
Well, because it's said publicly. Because it's said publicly, and it's your written statement, it's been deemed as, you know, someone's actual words.
As a written statement by the person and not by somebody else putting it onto your Facebook page.
Quickly, Mbali, now we still have a bit of time, but I want to go into something else. The immediate advantage of social media from a business perspective is the sheer number of persons to whom a business may connect.
Yes.
From a marketing point of view, it could be attractive for exposure, but the opposite is also true.
Indeed. I mean, there's so many cases where companies' social media accounts tweet or Facebook post the wrong thing. I mean, last year we had, I think it was US Airways, where a very pornographic image was actually broadcast. And, you know, of course they had to, you know, respond to that. I think, you know, you have to be aware of the fact that, you know, so many things can go wrong, and you have to have all those backup plans and backup strategies and, you know, apologies ready and waiting in order to, like, really just curb the communication there.
Are we not facing the danger, Raymond, of, we saw that in the Oscar Pistorius trial, that this avalanche of tweets coming out of the courthouse where people were tweeting evidence that was being given by people who were under oath, and some of the evidence most probably had not been tested.
Well, there is that factor, of course, that could intrude on the legitimacy of the trial in terms of the public view of the trial. But the judge is not going to pay any attention whatsoever to those tweets. And so I don't think that the legitimacy of the trial itself was affected by that sort of activity. But one does wonder when the legal profession, particularly the lawyers who were defending Oscar Pistorius, make a comment or use a tweet rather, or a Facebook comment as being damaging their client's case, and therefore should not have been presented in the public domain. We don't know when something like that is going to happen, but it didn't happen as far as I know in this case. But it could very well happen in the future that lawyers will take umbrage, and that may mean a difficulty for the person who did the tweeting.
There's also this urge by the media, we want to be first, so put it on Twitter.
That's right. Put it on Twitter.
Put it on Twitter.
No.
I mean,
but that area, the intention of that particular exercise was to give maximum publicity, to allow the case to be heard and seen by the people, as in terms of the view that justice should be seen to be done. And of course, there was the danger that it would be people would extrapolate from that the opportunity to make comments on the evidence or on the proceedings in court, which could be damaging either to the court officials or to the accused, or even to one of the witnesses. So, but that, as I say, has not yet been tested in any way by a protest against that sort of thing.
We have spoken about satire, we have spoken about cartoons, we have spoken. There's something else, lampooning. Lampooning. I don't know whether I'm pronouncing this incorrectly. Lampooning. The case of just a nurse who changed what used to be a product of a company and called it something else, black labor. And he was taken to court, but the Constitutional Court in the end ruled against the company. And should the question I wanted to ask there, should courts be ruling in this manner to help society understand parody, lampooning, and even satire? In other words, a court should be saying, no, but this is satire. Can you understand satire? We see a lot of people raise their voices around those issues.
Well, it's satire and also legitimate comment.
Yes.
But the other thing was that the court did not rule that it damaged the product produced by the South African breweries by the use of it in that way. In fact, some people may argue that it, in fact, increased the publicity for the product.
Yeah, I mean, I was about to say, we need to actually do a line chart and see, like, did sales actually dip at that time? Which I doubt it did. I mean, I believe that what he was doing was, of course, fair comment. It was legitimate in all that sense. And we're entering the realm of actual, freedom of speech as opposed to, what can you put on and offline. And I believe that, you're allowed to put on what you want online. Of course, you just have to bear in mind, who are you, intimidating and, like ragging on with what you're doing.
What it seems that what it seems clear that an individual could be held liable for publishing a negative comment on social media about another individual, which may injure his or her reputation. Can the same be said about companies and brands?
We should hold everybody liable to whatever they say and put online. Taco Bell the other year was, essentially brought to court in terms of like all these allegations about the meat that they use in their tacos and whatever the case may be. And it's all about, the image that you put online, the persona that you impersonate online, and you need to be able to actually take some sort of control over that, and I totally agree with that sentiment.
Well, the rules of defamation would decide whether a brand could defame another brand, or a person could defame a brand. By the case you mentioned, That's entirely dependent on how the material appears, and how it can be construed as being defamatory or damaging the interests of another company or person.
Earlier, Raymond, you made mention of there are standards for journalism that are looked after by the ombudsman and the press and the media. The press code, yes. Should we have a different set of standards for social media?
Well,
that's good.
The whole problem about that is who's going to implement
Who's going to bail the cat?
Who's going to be the institution that is going to do the regulation, apply that particular code, and that is very difficult. It's very easy, in a sense, for the broadcast media and the print media to have set up their own institutions. We call it self-regulation, or self-co-regulation in the case of the print media, and self-regulation in the case of the broadcast media. And they've set these up to deal with their particular communication channels. As soon as you get Facebook and Twitter, and the broad media, social media spectrum, how are you going to set up a body to say they are abiding by the code that we've decided to set up, or they aren't abiding by it? The danger of that being a government instituted code, or institution rather, which will in fact apply censorship rules, will go a lot further than any particular ethical code of conduct, but wish to in fact apply censorship to what appears on the social media. That is the danger.
I mean, that's
so you can't do it.
We'll take your response after the break. If you'd like to join us, you still have time to call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498, or tweet us at Recourse. Please stay with us.
Coming to you live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa. Welcome to AM News on SABC News. We're on DSTV channel 404. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. We'll be taking you through all the developing stories, all the leading stories in South Africa, in the continent of Africa and the rest of the world. The power utility has attributed the current wave of load shedding to what it has described as unforeseen technical problems at current power stations. Eskom has warned that there is a risk of a total blackout if consumers do not use electricity sparingly.
We must work together to make this world better for all. This is what Nelson Mandela told us. He taught us a very important lesson.
That's AM News, daily at 10 a.m. on SABC News.
Welcome back. We are still talking about the social media and press freedom, or freedom of expression. Well, Siyabonga, you wanted to say something before I rudely interrupted you.
No, of course. I mean, I think the idea of trying to regulate the entire, an entire country in terms of what they do and do not do on social media is like bordering on a police state, looking at what China does, which is like a whole-scale blocking of Facebook and Twitter, etc., because they believe that, people are leaking information about the country. And I think that's just really unfeasible. And if you do go into that realm, then you actually start tarnishing the idea of South Africa being a really free and fair country.
Yes, when you said bordering on a police state, you mean actually entering into the realms of a police state.
I'm trying to be conservative. Yeah.
One of the other things that I came across in my research was it would seem to me constitutional experts are not clear as to what constitutes hate speech on social media.
I think the whole idea is very subjective. I mean, like, what I may deem hate speech or racism is, you know, something that I believe personally, you know, as opposed to, like, you know, I mean, there's the idea of, you know, society may see something as being racially charged or whatever the case would be, but it's all basically, it comes down to the individual. And that's why it's so hard to define what is hate speech, what is racism.
He's absolutely correct. We as journalists have great difficulty, and in fact are very worried about the hate speech provisions in our law and the equality law, for instance, and in the Constitution. Because how do you define hate speech in practice? And that is extremely difficult. And it's questionable whether it should remain in the law and in the Constitution.
It could also be a kind of thing, I put something on social media, and I do this in the public interest.
Yes.
Can fault be found with me?
Depends if you're basically spreading misinformation, which is, you know, I think a really, really sore point in terms of social media, because that is there. I mean, you can go onto Facebook and there's so many groups and linked to so many sites which leak, you know, misinformation in terms of, you know, white genocide or crime and etc., because, you know, personally they believe that such and such is happening.
We have actually seen those kind of tweets coming from people like Steve Hofmeyr and the AfriForum.
Yes.
Where they said the killing of farmers on the farms in South Africa is genocide.
Well, it goes down to, you know, basic journalistic integrity there. Do you have the data to back it up? Of course not. So, you know, why spread that?
I think it was also the basis of Ms. Bridges' comments on Facebook.
Yes, I mean, you know, when we get into cases like that, it's all about, you know what, how people use their common sense. And it's what I, you know, preach, is use your common sense. If you see said and said post, and you read into it, but actually really read into it and try to find the facts that back up that statement, you find that it's really untrue. So it's about, you know, your own perceptions and how much time you got to invest in terms of, like, looking into how, whether this is...
There's something else I want to test with both of you, and that is the misunderstanding. In some cases it does happen that colloquial language is misunderstood and interpreted as hate speech and incitement of racism, like comments made by an African praise singer, for instance. I remember at some stage, sometime about a couple of years ago, a praise singer was praising the former minister, Louw, and he said some nasty things that only a praise singer can say.
Yeah.
And somebody said, but that guy insulted the minister.
and I mean, that it all goes down to the fact that the internet is heterogeneous. It's not homogeneous. You know, we don't share a common culture or common language, you know, amongst people. I mean, you find that you might say something in a certain way that might be misconstrued in the Middle East or in Asia or wherever the case may be. And, you know, you have no control over that. You know, you can only say what you want to say. And if someone takes umbrage with it, then they take umbrage with it. And it's how you deal with it that's, you know, dictates how the situation goes.
Can we use social media to preach tolerance and all of these kind of things that we need to teach for a state that is democratic?
Well, I think it's been done, isn't it? But shall we say in a rather coercive way.
I'll say it's very difficult to do that because unfortunately what you get with the internet is that people tend to troll, and to troll essentially is to just go against the grain, to say, oh, if people are happy about said situation, like, I don't know, when Mandela passed away, God bless his soul, you found that, you know, someone like Steve Hofmeyr was writing things like, oh, he was a terrorist, why are we, you know, like being sad for him? He was being a troll, and that's what internet society allows, is that people can actually express their views, and it might go against the grain, it might go against how everybody else is going, and that's trolling, essentially. So I think to try and teach tolerance, you know, means that you're going to have to be cognizant of that, and know that you cannot touch everybody.
Well, we're still discussing the issues of social media and the freedom freedom of speech or freedom of expression. Don't go away. We'll be back right after this.
for thought. In the words of Ray Davis, remember, a challenge only becomes an obstacle when you bow to it.
Of dedication and perseverance, Abayani Maitakore made history as one of South Africa's best performing matriculants of 2014, attaining 7 distinctions.
I believe that nothing should stand in your way if you see yourself in the future doing something great. So I just carried on and I never gave up. Though the circumstances I faced were challenging, I love challenges, so I was like, yeah man, bring it on, I can do it.
Join me, Refiwe Mwiba, on Bophelong, your show about those who take on and conquer life's challenges, every Saturday at 17:30.
Welcome back. Let's go to the Twitter community and see what the people there are saying on those platforms we are actually talking about. Lipaswa says, for relationship, it's worst enemy, but for news and marketing, it's a blessing in disguise. Oh, it's a blessing. No, he didn't say it's a blessing in disguise. Tamai Masajane says, no point in taking offense. Public discourse is rough, and it's not a place for the faint-hearted.
I agree with Tama. It's a dog-eat-dog world in terms of social media, and you need to be able to say, as a brand, as a person, you can expect the worst, but hope for the best, essentially.
Raymond?
Well, it's still subject to the laws of the country, and that of course is quite clear. So, sure, be robust, even be nasty, but within the confines of the law.
Yes.
Shouldn't people who are in public places be more tolerant of these kind of things?
I think they should be more aware, as opposed. I mean, like, of course, you have to tolerate the fact that you will be spoken up against. But, being aware of it means that you have some strategy in place in order to deal with it. So if it is someone's challenging on a platform that you feel strongly about, you should be able to respond in a way that is not really...
Shabonga and Raymond, thank you very much for your time, and thank you very much for being part of this. It was a riveting discussion. I enjoyed it, and unlike other days, I still want to continue talking to you. This has been Rights and Recourse. This program is repeated at 10 tonight and at 5 on Monday morning. From all of us in the studio, thank you to our guests and good afternoon.
Had there been harmony between the South African government and the Nigerian government, which came through in the latter stages, the bodies would have been repatriated quicker.
Now, we always get a lot of criticism as a public broadcaster, but just how far can media go in terms of reporting the facts?
Watch Media Monitor Sundays at 9 a.m. on the SABC News channel.
We kick off this week's show by seeing how Kenyans are paying tribute to the victims, as well as not only how they've coped, but how they returned stronger after the attacks.
Last year, images of the 4-day Westgate Mall attack saturated front pages.
In the Democratic Republic of Congo, artists have assembled to celebrate the peace this war-torn country has not had in a long time.
No conflict that can't be solved without a conversation.
The Journal, every Saturday at 1:30 on SABC News.